Right. Hello again. It's definitely that time. And yep, today we're going to speak about the historical reality of Jesus and what the perception, we're going to start actually with the perception, at least in Britain, of the man, the reality, or otherwise of Jesus Christ. So I'm going to get into that. I've also got an idea to do something about how C.S. Lewis came to Christ, depending on how long this first part takes me. I may just do another live stream. So let's speak about the historical reality of Christ. And I'm just going to jump straight in. So according to a poll of 2015, it was conducted by the Church of England. You may have heard of them. This poll suggested that some 4 out of 10 of the people in England, so that's not the UK, that's not Great Britain, that's just England, and those 4 out of 10, those 40%, do not believe that Jesus was a real person at all. So according to the poll's findings, 43% of those surveyed said they believed in the resurrection, and less than 10% regularly read the Bible. I don't know where, the demographic that they pulled these people from, but that's just a real shame in and of itself. So I'm reading from an article, basically snippets of an interview that was done with Tom Mayer. He is a professor of Bible studies at Shasta Bible College and Graduate School in California, which is in the United States. And he is not alone in this, thinks that these are pretty worrying statistics. And Tom, I'm right with you on that. So he said that within the survey, 25% of the 18 to 34-year-olds believed that Jesus Christ was actually a mythical character. Some opponents of Christianity ridicule, this doesn't include Muslims actually, I mean, they ridicule the account of him that we have, because they say without basis or any confirmation within the Quran that the historical accuracy of, the gospel has been corrupted, the Bible has been corrupted, etc., yada, yada, yada. But other opponents, such as I would suggest atheists mainly, ridicule the historical accuracy of the life and times of Christ, as is recorded in the New Testament. However, extra biblical verification of the existence of Christ, if we're just talking about his actual historical reality, and these exist from both Jewish and Roman primary sources, and therefore these should put to bed any niggles or worries about whether Jesus of Nazareth actually existed, which, spoiler alert, he did. So one such source can be found in a Jewish text found in the Babylonian Talmud. And the text, which has been around, it was codified in 550 AD. It was already in circulation like before that, and it affirms Jesus's death. Obviously, you can't experience or witness the death of somebody who doesn't exist. So it states in one of its tractates, which is Sanhedrin 43a, that Jesus was killed by the authorities on Passover Eve by way of stoning and then hung on a tree because, this bit's a bit off, he practiced sorcery. Potentially that's a misreading of him, like raising the dead and, all of those things. He incited people to idol worship and he led the Jewish people astray. They were no strangers to that at that point, I'm sure. So this contradicts actually the New Testament account concerning, well, I don't know. You could be forgiven actually for, as an outsider observing these things, that could have seemed pretty accurate, apart from the stoning. However, even if it contradicts the New Testament, it demonstrates the Jewish acceptance actually 500 years and more after Jesus's death, that Jesus was an actual person whose death could be reported on. And another source, which I do love this entire book actually, but this is dated to the 1st century AD. So that's the same century in which Christ, did his ministry and was executed, and therefore is obviously much closer to the time of his actual death. The Jewish Roman historian Flavius Josephus, who anybody who watches Speaker's Corner, you'll hear him referred to as just simply Josephus, a little bit like Cher in that respect, I suppose. And he wrote it's a brilliant account, actually. It's a complete text about the Roman governor of Judea, who was Pontius Pilate, and he touches upon Christ. So I've got the actual, let me just grab. So it's the book that I'm referring to is the Antiquities of the Jews. And in it, he writes both about Jesus, about James, the brother of Jesus, and John the Baptist. Book 18 of the text, which is known as the Testimonium Flavianum, it speaks of Christ's sentencing to death by Caesar. So I'm just going to, by Pontius Pilate. So I'm just going to get my copy of that book up, and I should have it ready. Yes. So now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was, in brackets, the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again the third day. As the divine prophets had foretold, these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him, and the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day, or this day either. Spoiler alert. So let's get back to my notes, to the text. Okay. So I love that the resurrection is recorded outside of the Bible as a historical fact. So in another text, Josephus wrote about the martyrdom of James, the brother of Christ, and he, Josephus, identifies him with the words, the brother of Jesus. So there are also several references to Christians and indirectly to Jesus in Roman literature from the following century, the 2nd century and afterwards. So when speaking of Christians, the Roman historian Tacitus, who's got a date of 115 AD, so that's some 80 odd years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, states, the author of this name, in brackets Christians, Christ, suffered the ultimate penalty at the hands of the procurator Pontius Pilate during the imperium of Tiberius. It is undeniable that biblical and extra-biblical, not more importantly, but equally importantly from the point of view of refuting or countering wannabe debunkers of Christianity or the person of Jesus Christ, to show them that he is an actual historical person. So assured of his historical existence, the challenge that we now face, as C.S. Lewis, if you don't know who he is, where have you been? Like, he's just, God bless him, he's an excellent writer and lay theologian. He once put it this way: you must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or else something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. So just as an aside, before I continue with just a short bit more, what Lewis went through in that particular piece of writing was the fact that very, very few people, even like non-Christians is who he was referring to, ever, what's the word? They never really put Jesus down. They're willing to say, yeah, he was a great guy. He seemed pretty like nice. He had really nice sayings and all. They very rarely say, what a shady character, which is what I'm sure Muslims come up against all the time in the person of Muhammad and people's opinions of him. They certainly do if they're around me for any amount of time. but very few people cast aspersions on the character, the moral character of Christ. However, what Lewis is arguing is that's an incorrect position, really, unless he is God, because he claims to forgive sins and he's not even the wronged party, if you see what I mean. Lewis says that if somebody borrows £5 from me and doesn't pay me back, it's okay for me to say I forgive you. But if somebody else comes along and says that's okay, I forgive you, that's not really their business, unless they are the one who's being sinned against, unless they are in fact God. And therefore, by claiming to have the authority to forgive sins, Christ, Lewis says, is either telling the truth, or he is a madman in the same scheme as one who claims to be a poached egg. Like, it's literally that clear cut. He either is what he says, or it's much, much worse, because good moral teachers do not go around telling lies. And that's the bottom line. If he's not God, he cannot forgive sins, and therefore he's lying, which isn't a very good moral teacher. So there are obviously always historians who've challenged the authenticity of some of these texts. So Josephus's writings have been interpreted by some as later Christian interpolations. However, another guy, Paul Meyer, has argued that Josephus, who was Jewish, who was not a Christian, would not have referred to Jesus as the Messiah. So that's an argument against. Queen's University Belfast, which is in the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, in 2012, there was a paper published, and that paper has analysed the testimonium in quite a great detail. So the paper said this. Here's a small quote from this paper, and it reads thusly: "The first Christian writer whom we can see apparently using the text of Josephus is Origen." And if you haven't heard of him, maybe I'll make some videos on these guys, because their disputes among themselves, the earliest church fathers, are just a blessing. They're just an example of Romans 8:28, quite frankly. The fact that they disagreed on small matters and large alike is brilliant for us, because they always seem to write a book about it. There was never any like a quick letter and a telling off. There was just, against heresies and all of these brilliant works, which give us just such a snapshot of the way things were at the time, what they were arguing against, what they perceived to be known by everyone, as it were. These can attest to the earliest agreements upon the Trinity, for example, the earliest heresies, why they were, how they built up, because Origen, I won't go into it, but he didn't come out of the blue with some of his wackier ideas. They kind of built up through other of these early scholars. So the first Christian writer whom we can see apparently using the text of Josephus is Origen of the 3rd century. And in his commentary on Lamentations, Origen said of Josephus, "Although not far from the truth, he," meaning Josephus, "did not believe in Jesus as the Christ, as God, as, the way Christians view Jesus. Therefore, it's really an affirmation and an attestation to his work." If you see what I mean, he had no vested interest in portraying Christ in any way other than accurately, actually, because he had his own commission to write these histories, the antiquities of the Jews. So that's just that affirmation, by the way, that he was not a Christian, was then repeated in his own Contra Celsum. So that's pretty short work I made of that. So I may, I'm going to go into C.S. Lewis because love him. Okay, let's see. So I may actually just download this video and chop it up and make it into 2. So welcome. We're going to do a video now about how C.S. Lewis came to Christ. If you don't know who he is, just please get a book, look on the internet, do something, because his writings are so edifying and so pleasingly laid out, and every counter thought is kind of followed to its logical conclusion. And he described himself actually as the most reluctant convert in all of England when he finally stopped trying to debunk Christianity and came to confess Christ as his Lord. So shortly before he was admitted to Oxford University, and that was in the year 1916, to study, that was as a student, not his later being a professor there. So to study English literature, C.S. Lewis, who was a recent convert to atheism at the time, got into an argument with a friend about Christianity and its supernatural elements. So his letters on the topic during this period reveal the spirit of the age, which was a disposition against religious belief. And you can understand that whilst the First World War was ongoing, there would have been horrifying stories coming back. And I guess it's pretty understandable that people's faiths were rocked by that. And also, you know, other things. I think progression sometimes superficially leads away from faith, because comfort also leads people into a sense of security, and they forget to rely on their creator, basically. So Lewis, in these letters, he berated his friend for not accepting the recognized scientific account of the growth of religions. So the miraculous stories of the life of Jesus were on exactly the same footing as that of Adonis, Dionysus, Isis, and Loki. Bless him. All religion, wrote Lewis, in the days when he was wrong, I might add. Sorry, Lewis. All religion, he wrote, was an attempt by primitive man to cope with the terrors of the natural world. Just so with Christianity. The story of the resurrection was a sublime retelling of ancient pagan myths about gods and goddesses who, by initiating the cycle of the seasons, represented the pattern of death and rebirth. And he talks beautifully about that again once he's a Christian. Spoiler alert. So by the beginning of the 20th century, it seemed that science had consigned the doctrine of the resurrection to the realm of wish fulfillment. The new discipline of psychology would attempt the same. Sigmund Freud, the creator of psychoanalysis, you may have heard of him, viewed religious feeling as an expression of the childhood desire for a paternal figure, for a father's protection, in fact. The origin of the religious attitude can be traced back in clear outlines as far as the feeling of infantile helplessness, wrote Freud, in Civilization and Its Discontents. There may be something further behind that, but for the present it is wrapped in obscurity. So he's hedging his bets, actually. Lewis was perfectly in step with the newly established zeitgeist, which regarded religion as inherently irrational and repressive. Superstition, of course, in every age has held the common people, he wrote. But in every age, the educated, what a snob, and thinking ones have stood outside it. Mysteries about the universe remained to be uncovered, he conceded, also hedging his bets. But in the meantime, I'm not going to go back to the bondage of believing in any old and already decaying superstition. 15 years later, however, Lewis, who was by then an Oxford scholar in English literature, abandoned his atheism and embraced historic Christianity. He went on, and what a blessing that was for the rest of us, not to mention him. He went on to become the 20th century's most celebrated Christian author. His works of apologetics, such as Mere Christianity and The Problem of Pain, have never, ever gone out of print. His children's series, The Chronicles of Narnia, please read them, which are awash in biblical imagery, has been translated into more than 47 languages. Ironically, it was an argument over mythology, about the meaning of myth within human experience, that brought Lewis around on the subject of Christianity. So on September 19th, 1931, in what might rank as one of the most important conversations in literary history, Lewis took his friend and colleague, J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of, well, I don't know about then, but the future author of the Lord of the Rings trilogy and other works. They went together on a long walk along the River Cherwell, which is near Magdalen College, which is in Oxford, England. A professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford, Tolkien had been studying ancient and medieval mythologies for decades. He'd begun writing his own epic mythology about Middle-earth whilst he was a soldier in France during World War I. As Lewis recounted the conversation within his own autobiography, which is called Surprised by Joy, Tolkien insisted that myths were not falsehoods, but rather intimations of a concrete spiritual reality. Jack, when you meet a god sacrificing himself in a pagan story, you like it very much. You are mysteriously moved by it. Tolkien said Lewis agreed. Tales of sacrifice and heroism stirred up within him a sense of longing, but not when he encountered them in the Gospels. The pagan stories, Tolkien insisted, are God expressing himself through the minds of poets. They are splintered fragments of a much greater story. The account of Christ and his death and resurrection is a kind of myth, he explained. It works on our imagination in much the same way as other myths, with this difference: it actually happened. Perhaps only Tolkien, with his immense intelligence and creativity, could have persuaded Lewis that his reason and imagination might become allies in the act of faith. Lewis's objections melted away, although I would say it took some time. Like I read here, ants into a furnace. The old myth of the dying god, without ceasing to be myth, comes down from the heaven of legend and imagination to the earth of history, he wrote after his conversion. We must not be ashamed of the mythical radiance resting upon our theology. The modern mind, which is buttressed by science and psychology, seems either ashamed or baffled by this radiance. Even today, many church pulpits have transformed the historic teaching of the resurrection into a homey metaphor of springtime renewal, an unwitting nod to pagan religion. Yet, herein lies the startling, non-negotiable claim of the Christian faith, the event that turned a disillusioned band of followers into the most resilient and transformative religious community in history. At its heart, it is the story of the God of love on a rescue mission for mankind. Christ has died, Christ is risen. Once introduced into the world, the hope of the resurrection became the axis upon which Western civilization turns. For believers from everywhere, from as far afield as you can think of, the truth about the human story, what once seemed wrapped in obscurity, was revealed basically in shattering clarity on Easter morning. And the myth became a fact. So, right, let's just come back to the screen. Okay. Right, Bible outreach. God bless you, if you remember God. All right, then. So, yeah, if you have any questions or if you would like to troll me by remaining silent, that's absolutely fine also, because I do have half a life to be getting on with, but only a small one. Yeah. Okay, then. So, love Lewis, absolutely love him. I've got a playlist actually entitled C.S. Lewis, I think, which is some short readings from his essays, and also partially I've recorded the audio for the Screw Tape Letters, which is also just one of my favourite fictionalised apologetic books. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. I may have to just alter the title somewhat to include Lewis, but you know, never let a good C.S. Lewis moment go to waste, as it were. Okay, then. So I'm going to say God bless you, and I'll see you hopefully very soon. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, repent, pray, come to Jesus. You know, it makes sense. What's the point in resisting? You may as well subscribe to Bible Outreach if you feel inclined. Otherwise, do remember to share this video, and yeah, God bless you. And drop a comment in the comment section and I'll get back to you. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.